everyone, and welcome to episode 497 of the MTGGoldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week, starting with a very tired-looking Richard. How are you doing this fine Monday, Richard?
Good morning, Seth. It is actually Tuesday for me. It is actually midnight. If you drill a hole straight down and go up the other side of Earth, I'll be right there. I'm not even sure if that's correct, but I've been told that as a child. But yeah, I'm squatting. I should take a picture of the setup. I'm squatting on a toddler chair, and we are recording this podcast. Let's see if I can squat for an hour before cramping up.
Oh, that's like a workout. That is like a workout to get through this gas. But yeah, we got another coasting. Krim, are you squatting today? How are you sitting?
I do not have that privilege of doing squats and working out my hammies at the yeah, no, how you all doing? Especially Richard. Richard's gonna be buff by the end of this recording.
So anyway, today we're gonna be bouncing around a little bit. Got a few little topics to start off with, some arena news, an update on the judge thing from last week, and then our big topic for this week is something I wanted to talk about for a while, which is what makes a good Magic format. A lot of times I complain about formats. We all complain about formats. The community complains about formats. But one thing that I don't know if I've ever heard people really have a conversation about is the other side of that. What makes a format good? What are we actually looking for that makes a Magic format good, enjoyable, fun to play? So we're going to delve into that. And then we're going to try to answer some Fishmail this week. So that is the overview for the cast. Before we jump into it, a quick reminder that today's show is brought to you by Card Conduit. And Card Conduit's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. If you ever get tired of the hassles of buy listing, you can skip them with Card Conduit. You can use our curated service and send in as many cards as you want with a buy list value of $1 or more and pay just a 5% service fee. And if you want to do a bit of work, you can use a sorted service where you list and sort your cards in advance and pay just a 2% fee. Either way, you're going to get a detailed report with the results and a fast payment once your order is processed. And right now, you can even get another 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/MTGGoldfish. Card Conduit, it's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some Magic. And let's start with our little topics. First one I wanted to bring up is we got the full Mystery Booster 2 spoiler. So Mystery Booster 2, it's pretty much all reprints, right? They got the cool playtest cards, a bunch of reprints with unique borders, white borders, and future sight borders. But one thing that came out that I had to ask you guys about is Wizards, for the first time, is printing some Alchemy cards from Magic Arena. The digital-only cards is actual paper cards. So they do have the acorn on them, so they're not tournament legal. But the big one that people have been talking about is Oracle of the Alpha. So Oracle of the Alpha, maybe the most iconic Alchemy card, 3-mana 2/3 Flying Bird Wizard. It says when it enters the battlefield, I guess it didn't get printed in time for the update to just enters, but when it enters the battlefield, conjure the power 9 into your library and then shuffle. And then whenever it attacks, you get to scry 1. So essentially, when this enters the battlefield, you basically shuffle the power 9 into your library. What do you think about this card coming to paper? I have two big questions. One is, someone comes up to you in a commander pod and wants to play this. Do you say yes? Two is, how do you actually play this? Let's say you open this in your Mystery Booster draft. How do you actually make this function? Like, do you just Sharpie up some basics to be the power 9 and shuffle them into your deck? Like, how do you actually like play it in practice? So what do you guys think of Oracle of Alpha coming to paper Magic?
If you come up to me and ask me to play this, I think this is offensive to the game. And I'm just kidding. I love this card. I think it's hilarious. I think you should totally play it. Please. And as you already know, I do not care if you play with proxies. So I do ask that you at least have some bot like around you or somewhere. But like if you need to, then at least just use a Sharpie. But this is such a fun card. I think I would love to see this in person. I would thoroughly love to see how you draw Black Lotus, all these things. And if you have your own fun proxies, I'd love to see what that looks like. So cool card, fun.
Are you going to buy power 9 so you can play this, Richard?
Well, no, and I will let you play it, but I will not be happy about it because
What?
it's such a bad like UX issue. So imagine you're Phil and you play Fairy Artisan, and then someone plays one of these things. Then you're like, cool, I get one. Now I get to conjure 9 power 9 in my deck, and then you gotta actually do it, right? You gotta like proxy up you use an Ultimate Guard multi-token for 9 power 9, shuffle them into your deck, sleeve them. Do you have 9 extra sleeves, by the way? Sleeve them, shove them into your deck, shuffle, and then after the game, you gotta remember to take it out, right? So this is one of those mechanics that's perfect for digital because you do nothing, right? Like you cast the card and then Arena just puts the cards in your deck. But in paper, it's kind of miserable to play. So I don't know. I don't know about these alchemy cards. Like, if it somehow just magically worked, it'd be great, right? Like, I much prefer like maybe like Karth or something where like I don't know, you roll a die or something, and then some power 9 token just pops up. But the fact you had to shuffle it into your deck, and then also this is reverse deck thinning. Right now, you're not going to draw lands because you have 9 in your deck, right? Like, it's
but
just
now
weird.
you can win with Battle of Wits. You can win with Battle of Wits in Commander now. I mean, it's still Acorn, but I mean, my concern. So, if someone just wanted to play this fairly, I'd be kind of okay with it, especially if they like are prepared. If they show up with their like pre-proxied power 9 and like that's what they're trying to do, I would be perfectly cool with it. I am a little concerned if you're not prepared for it. It does seem like the game would get really slow. My only other concern would be I've seen people play this on Arena, and one of the most popular ways people play this is just like try to blink it and flicker it as many times as possible to get as many power 9 as you can into your deck. And that seems like it would be kind of tedious to do in paper. Like if someone plays this and has to like Sharpie up 9 power 9 cards and shuffle them in their deck, and then they blink at the next turn and got to do it again. Oh my God, that would be the worst game of Commander of all.
How many shuffles are you allowed per turn before you're DQ'd? Like
the other thing, yeah, it's a good point. I also don't know how this is technically supposed to play because Krim, you might know this better than I do. Is conjuring actually technically exactly the same as shuffling into your deck? I think technically it's not. I think technically when you conjure, it doesn't change your library order, but the cards are like randomly inserted into your library without your deck actually being shuffled.
Are you serious?
Yes.
That's technically how it works on Arena.
I mean, if you have like a top or something, you can keep looking at the top. You know it, right? So like...
Yeah.
Huh.
Then you have to individually... Essentially, if you did this in paper, you would have to individually pull the... take all the 9 cards and like mana weave
them into your library.
You gotta roll 100-sided die to get the locations to insert, and then you gotta make sure it's random, right? You don't want to stack the good ones on top. So, oh my goodness.
Dude, that sounds actually kind of fun, but like miserable. Like the main thing of all of that is the sleeving part of it, right? Like, do you have enough sleeves on the side? And then if you don't want to like do that, then maybe don't clone this.
I mean, just troll that. You hive mind, like somehow like keep cloning it for your opponents. So like your opponents just keep shuffling P9 into their deck, and like that's your whole deck.
No,
that's your whole deck.
Now I kind of want to build. I think that deck would go undefeated because your opponents will just get so tired of having to proxy that they're just gonna give up. Oh, now I want to build that. That would be so funny if that was a goal of your deck, just to make your opponents keep proxying power 9.
Wait, here's the real question: are they giving us power 9 tokens?
Like, I hope so.
Is this
I
part
don't
of the
think
set?
they will, but they should. I don't think so. We got Garth, right, in Modern Horizons 2 that like created a Black Lotus, created a Brain Geyser. They didn't give us any tokens for that. So I hope they can do, but I have not seen anything about there being power 9 tokens in this set.
You could get the Duel Masters Black Lotus.
Oh, that is true. That's kind of like an official
that
proxy.
is the old WotC game, and like I love that. To use that as a Black Lotus proxy.
I think
I don't know.
It's all just a scam to try to sell 30th anniversary edition. Get rid of the extra stock that didn't buy last year. All right, so that's coming to mystery boosters. Speaking of mystery boosters, there was one other topic with mystery boosters. They announced the festival in the box. So we talked about that last week. The only way to get mystery boosters is go to a convention like MagicCon Vegas coming up in a couple of months, or you can get the festival in the box. So they announced what the festival in the box is. It goes on sale August 19th, which is actually this this next Monday, a week from today. So it goes on sale through the Secret Lair website. A week from today, $249.99. So $250. You get a Mystery Booster 2 display box, a 24 booster display box, a Lost Caverns of Ixalan collector booster, Wilds of Eldraine collector booster, a Commander Masters collection booster, a Secret Lair drop, the Little Legends foil Secret Lair drop, and then also the promos that you would get going to the Magic Con: a Ponder, a Swords of Plowshares, a Convention Marrow playtest card, and a Plains. So, what do you think of this festival in a box? My first impression was it actually seems like kind of a fair deal price-wise. Like, you're getting the booster box, so that's like $100 and some. The 3 collector boosters, that's like 60, 70, 80 bucks if you're going to buy those individually. Foil Secret Lair drops like $40, and you get the promos. If you add all that together, you're probably paying like 120-ish for a booster box, which is actually kind of what booster boxes go for. So I think it's a fair deal. My main concern would be, are we going to be able to get these? Do you have any fear for that, Krim? I know last time we had some Secret Lair drops that were limited edition like this is. They sold out really quick. Do you think this will be like higher supply than those Secret Lairs and it's going to be realistic to snag one? Or is this one of those, you better be there at noon next Monday or else you're just out of luck?
I mean, I'd like to think that you can. They produced a lot of these, right?
I would hope.
I mean, this. I don't know. The only. I have no idea on the availability. I can only hope that they just made enough so that we can get it, because the idea of the festival in a box is so this way you still get to celebrate the event if you can't go.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, that'd be really funny if I just couldn't celebrate it at all and it was sold out. But I do also have another issue, which I love. I love the little legends, but do you notice how it says right between legends and edition, it says foil? Why does it say foil only? Because I do not want foil. Please do not make me get a foil.
It's so funny because that's supposed to be like an upgrade compared to non-foil. It's like the more expensive one, but actually when you talk to players, like, oh no, they're making me buy foils.
I really love this drop. And imagine if I come down with a serious like anger or some kind of issues, and I've got to go and play Omnath Locus of Creation at an event, right? I would love to play this Omnath and not have to worry about getting DQ'd, because this Omnath is very cute.
It is.
And I don't know why they gave it a little mouth and it just became like angry flubber, and I kind of love it. But on top of that, I just love all these cards, and I would really hate to have these only in foil.
What do you think, Richard?
I mean, they're directly selling you a booster box, kind of, right? Like you know what it reminds me of? You know, like 5-10 years ago, like all the companies started delivering you like loot crates. You like subscribe to like a subscription service, and then they send you a bunch of junk you don't really want. And like theoretically, the MSRP of all this like adds up to more than you paid for your subscription. So like throwing in random booster packs is kind of weird. Like you're kind of just buying this for the mystery boosters and also the Secret Lair. I would actually like it if it was actually like a con. Like you get like a t-shirt, you get pins, you get like kind of like all the random swag you get at a con, and like get it delivered to you, right? But like I don't want to buy a random like Eldraine collector's booster. Like I mean, I guess that's a thing, right? But I don't know. But this is kind of just Watson selling you mystery boosters. Like really, if you don't want the mystery booster box, you don't get this, right? So this is just another way to cut out LGSs. I don't know, right? But it's weird. They're just selling a booster box to you.
I don't really understand the random collector boosters either. Like, is that just a way to get rid of like old stock or something? Like, why? Why 3 random collector boosters from sets from like it's not like the most recent sets, or it doesn't have any theme to do with Vegas. Like, it's just 3 random. It reminds me of those Walmart repacks. Those where it's like buy this box and inside are like some collector boosters. Like, is there a point to those that I'm not seeing?
I mean, if you're trying to emulate Vegas, these would have to come with packs of cigarettes, because that's all I smell in Vegas. I hate it. I despise that, but I don't know why either. Like,
to be fair,
I'm more so concerned like if I get murders,
right? Like when you go to Vegas, but you get like a Dominaria remastered or United or whatever.
I guess
collector
that's
booster
true.
as well.
You get like a random booster, so
which they use to jack up the price of
credits.
your admission and declare it's okay because you got like 3 collector boosters. Like that's what they're doing, right? They're just like adding filler fluff so they can increase the price, right? Like.
Yeah.
I would
yeah.
rather have like actually like playable collector boosters or something. I would hate if like, oh, yo, who got the Murders at Karloff packs? Oh, that
So,
sucks.
so I got one more question on this. I want one of these boxes. Am I better off trying to get it through the website next Monday or waiting in line at the con in Vegas to try to get it at the con? I'm actually not sure which one is a more successful plan.
Oh man, you will
'Cause those
need
lines
divine
are
intervention
long.
to
I have-
get that line.
Oh, those lines are so massive. It's like, do I want to spend half a day at Vegas waiting in line, or do I try to turbo through the website and snag it that way?
I think you're likely to get some amount of this maybe at the con if you're willing to slog through the 50-hour wait.
Yeah.
Online, I am a little bit worried. I have no idea the online part of this. There's no actual like info on how many of these are made for you to get online. So I hope good luck if you try to get it online, but I at least know that if I go in person, I probably could get it. I just gotta wait.
Are these going to be that hot? Do we have this conversation
the
for
mystery.
buying like Unfinity? Like this is essentially
Well,
like a
no, but
silver
this-
bordered set, right? Like, do we think it's going to be
Well-
flying off the shelves?
Have you seen some of the things that they've been showing, like the time shift or whatever, time shifted borders of
Yeah.
like some old cards?
I
Like,
mean, it's
like all of
reprints
those-
plus
yeah,
playtest cards plus Acorn cards, right? Like that's
like
essentially
white border cards, like Richie,
Yeah,
come on,
I-
you
yeah,
gotta
I mean,
be
yeah,
a white
but
border
The
it'll-
first one
enjoyer.
was pretty like people really like the first mystery boosters. I think it's gonna be hot. I expect it to
It's gonna be
sell out
hot?
pretty. I mean, hopefully they printed enough of them that it's not like a big issue, but I expect that it's gonna sell out pretty quickly. The festival in the box. I think the value's like good enough, and I think people are hyped for this set. Like, yes, it is a little unsetty, but the reprints are really good, and it has these unique treatments that we've never gotten before, like white borders coming back for the first time in so long. So I think like people are just gonna want to open this box. So I think it's gonna go really fast, but I guess we'll see next Monday. Oh, one other topic, speaking of last week. So last week we talked a little bit about the $48,000 judge call and all the stuff around like the Secret Lair Showdown issue at the last, what was it, Gen Con, I believe. Well, I talked to a couple judges over the week and wanted to clarify just how the judge program works now. So the way the judge program works now is there's something called Judge Foundry, which trains and certifies judges. This is for North America. There's also ones in other parts of the world, but it's run by judges. They train and certify the judges. Tournament organizers don't necessarily require that you have a certification to work their events, but they said that basically everyone who's running events is like a level 3+ judge, and they have no affiliation with Wizards. There was a big lawsuit thing with if judges were employees, so Wizards kind of like stepped away from anything with the judge program. So essentially there still is a group that like trains and certified judges, the Judges Foundry. It's just not connected to Wizards at all at this point. So that is how the judge program works in 2024, at least in North America. So we weren't really sure last week, but that is, I just wanted to get it out there so people weren't confused about like how people become judges or whatever. Anyway, let's talk about our big topic for the week, which is what makes a good Magic format. So I feel like we complain about formats a lot. We complain about Modern. We complain about Pioneer. Like, it's one of Magic players' favorite things to do, I think, is to complain about whatever new broken thing is going on, what needs to be banned. And I've been thinking about it recently, and I realized we don't really talk about what makes a format good. If we're always going to be complaining about this or that format, this or that card, maybe we need some sort of baseline understanding of like, what are we actually looking for? What do we want out of a format? What do we actually think makes a good format? So I have a pretty big list of stuff that I went through that we can talk about, but I'm curious, just gut reaction. What for you guys makes a good format in Magic?
Oh, I think I'll just go ahead and start. I think for me personally, I like more of a gameplay. I think gameplay is pretty big in this. Deck diversity doesn't always mean healthy. I think people assume that just because there's a few different decks, that's immediately a good format, or like maybe there's only one deck and that's a bad format. But I do think a lot of it boils down to me just with gameplay. I do love when there's a lot of decks. Like I feel like this current standard, I have been able to meme a lot more by playing and building a bunch of different decks, and have it actually win some games. And then, of course, there's how much can you interact with like some of the best things, right? Like I didn't like Field of the Dead because you couldn't interact with it really. Like a lot of those cards that are really powerful. If I could actually have a counterplay to it, I think that's pretty good. I like having counterplay to a lot of whatever's going on in the meta. And then, of course, like I think the biggest part of it is actually just going to be gameplay for me. So that probably dictates it for me.
What do you think, Richard? What do you look for in a good format?
Fun. What does fun mean? Fun, because I'm a sweaty person that plays a lot of whatever I'm playing. So, I am like a grinder, essentially. I like it when the amount of time spent is reflected in my success, right? So if I spend 20 hours versus someone who spends 5 hours, I would expect to be better than them, right? And I would expect to see consistent improvement. Like I could continually get better. Obviously, within some limits, you're going to plateau, et cetera, right? But, if I play Modern for 500 hours, I should be seemingly better than if I played Modern for 40 hours, which is something that I don't know Magic has reached, right? I feel Magic's gone backwards in that. I feel limited, maybe the last Stronghold where this is kind of relevant. But then there are like other ancillary factors like diversity and can I play my old cards and things like that. But essentially like skill testing. Like, I like dunking on noobs, right? When someone doesn't know what they're doing, I like to beat them. It's kind of upsetting when you just kind of lose to someone who doesn't know what they're doing and you're like, wow, that sucked, right? Like that you clearly did everything in the matchup wrong, but you still won anyway. That hurts, right? That hurts. And when it happens time and time again, it really hurts, right? So something about skill expression is my most important thing. And that's the old school Spike mentality, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I think you want the noob to win some percentage of the time. I think if the noob never wins, that's a negative for the game. Like you want some amount of variance there. But at the same time, if the noob is winning too often, whether you're just playing suboptimally, I think that's a negative too, right? Because it tells you that this is just like a game of luck essentially. And there's no point in me actually trying to learn the game or practice or like there's no skill involved. So I think it's really hard to like hit that balance. I think traditionally, Magic was pretty good at that, right? I always have felt that Magic is a very skill-intensive game. You think it's gotten less skill-intensive, Richard? Is that just because of like the face roll cards, as Krim says, like the snow? Like, is that what does it, or is it something else?
I'm hesitant to answer because it's possible that I just suck and I'm washed, right? So I'm like actually very curious, like LSV or Paulo or Reduke or something, like how they would talk about skill expression, but in my personal noob experience, I feel it's a lot less. I feel the expression is like deck building, like sideboard choices, like understanding the meta, putting the sideboard correctly, and mulliganing. And then the game, like, is not exactly autopilot, but it kind of just like plays itself, right? And there are a lot of matches where you'll just straight up lose, and you're like, I did everything I was supposed to do, but I didn't put 8 sideboard slots for this deck, right? And it just crushed me. So, but I don't know, right? It could be that I just suck, right? But that's why I'm very curious what like high level pros, world champions say about skill expression in Magic in 2024 versus like 2014.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what the audience has to say about it too. If you're listening, let us know what you think. Has that changed over the decades of Magic? So I have a pretty long list. My list is actually 10 things long that makes for a good Magic format. So I'm going to go through some of these and I want to see if y'all agree with them. So for me, number 1 is diversity. I think I really look for diversity in a good format. And there's actually like at least 4 different kinds of diversity. You have archetype diversity, which is where you get like that rock, paper, scissors meta that we talk about, where like aggro you loses to mid-range loses to control, and it goes back around. Aggro beats control. So we really want that rock, paper, scissors archetype diversity. You have deck diversity, which is just like how many different decks are playable in the format. Then you have card diversity, which is you want a bunch of different cards to be playable. That's one of like my criticisms of like the One Ring in Modern. Even though it shows up in a bunch of different decks, it's in so so many different decks that it kind of takes away from the diversity because it's always eating up a card slot. And then this is one someone else mentioned that I thought was good. Gameplay diversity. You want your games to play out differently. If the games are playing out the same way every single time, that's going to take away from replayability and end up getting boring. So how do you think our current formats are doing with diversity? I feel like Standard's in a pretty good place, I would say. With
Standard's
diversity.
all 4 of those that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I think right now, especially we just went through rotation, so that is a benefit for Standard. But I think Standard kind of hits pretty much all of these, right, Crit?
Yeah, I thought Standard hit all of this out for quite a while though, because right now I am feeling that after the rotation, maybe it'll feel a little bit better. People don't see Kamigawa, so they're feeling a little more card diversity, and things like that. But yeah, like all around, Standard has been hitting this and has been in their stride for quite a while now. So I am really happy, just with where Standard is.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. What do you think about Modern, Richard? How does Modern rank with diversity at the moment?
I don't know. Everyone's just waiting for Nadu. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
Who knows?
Really, no one knows. No one's taking it seriously,
Well-
except the challenges. You bring your Nadu deck, but outside of that, you just do whatever because you're just waiting for it to pass. So I think card diversity, deck diversity are suffering. Possibly gameplay is suffering. You don't want to see these Nadu loops. But once Nadu is gone, maybe it's fixed. I don't know. But I think everyone knows Nadu is an issue and we're just waiting to see what Wizards does with it.
Yeah, I think that Modern does really well with archetype diversity, I would say, in general. Like, usually all the different archetypes end up being playable, from like aggro to combo to control and mid-range, even to some extent. So I think it usually does pretty well there. I think card diversity is maybe where it's been lacking the most since like Modern Horizons 2, where you just get these like ultra staples that show up in every deck, and then it starts to make the gameplay feel a little bit the same. But number 2, so that's diversity. Number 2, agency. Basically, you want to feel like what you're doing matters. And I think this kind of a little bit ties in with the skill issue that we were talking about before. But you want agency when you're building your decks. You want to feel like the choices that you make with putting a card in your deck or not putting a card in your deck is actually going to have an impact on whether you win a game, whether you lose a game. And then you want agency in gameplay. Like, do my decisions matter? Or is it just like the autopilot thing that Richard was talking about, where it doesn't really matter what decisions anyone makes? You just kind of play the cards and it's going to like end up, with someone winning. And I feel like this might be where Magic has been a little lacking lately, at least in some formats. I feel like even in Standard, I don't know if you've noticed this, Grim. I feel like even in Standard, sometimes I feel like I don't have that much agency in my gameplay, where there's these like the aggro slick shot show off draws, or like the mouse draws where they just kill you like on turn 3, and it's like literally nothing I did was gonna matter. Like, I guess maybe the agency would be mulliganing for a removal spell or something, but like nothing I really do in that game is gonna impact the outcome of the game. Do you ever feel like that?
No, because I accounted for, like, usually I pack a lot of hate for right now, really cheap interaction. So the little bit of the deck building right now, I am hedging a little bit, where I am aimed towards trying to beat like these these best of 1 style aggro decks, or even in best of 3, right? These aggro decks exist, and I was gonna say that right now, those aggro decks, they kind of have so far some like water cooler talk. Oh, it doesn't take any skill, yada point this, and then your big creature hits. I think that both sides of the field here are absurdly skill intensive. You have to deck build, hedge your bets towards like playing against these lower to the ground aggro decks. You got to have a lot of cheap interaction. You should be mulling for them. And then, of course, the aggro decks on the other side of that, it's not as simple as just, I'm going to point Monstrous Rage and win the game. Because in the event once everybody starts wisening up and then starts having a lower curve, what are you going to do when they respond to it? If you put like all your eggs in one basket and they blow you out with a simple removal spell, that's GG's, right? Like, because I've seen a lot of those hands, and it's just like, they'll keep like 1 to 2 threats and a bunch of pump spells and like 1 or 2 lands, right? That's about it. And if they lose that threat, they just sit there for a very long time, and by then they've lost. So I think both sides of the field are actually very skill intensive for this. So I think skill expression in this Standard has been phenomenal.
Get good is what Krim is saying.
Yeah. Also get good.
Get good. Draw your temporary lockdown, fool.
So
Don't suck.
I think deck building is huge, right? I think you can skew your deck to beat anything. Like there's enough like hate cards and like powerful, like yeah, you put a bunch of void rends when everyone's playing warded creatures, you put a bunch of temporary lockdowns and you just like wreck all the things, right? I think that is super
Right
easy.
now it's Sheoldred's Edict, by the way.
Yeah, but I don't know about this gameplay. Like if you mull, you don't have your 1-drop, 2-drop removal. You mull again, you don't have it, your game is done. Right? You're gonna mull to 5 and win with this? Nope. Right? Not possible, right? Like there's a lot of these weird scenarios, or I don't know. You get like these janky hands where you need to tap out, but then you can't tap out. Right? And then it ultimately comes back to a deck building issue, right? But
Yeah.
is it really? Like maybe it's just not possible, right? Like if you just actually net deck the meta decks that won the whatever, like that's kind of like where they're at, right? Like what are you gonna do about this? So I don't know. Part of it is deck building, but once you're already locked into that tournament, you're playing 6 rounds or 5 rounds or 9 rounds with this deck. And then if you feel like you've lost agency there, well, you're done, right? Once you mental boom in Magic, it's over, right? So that's the rough part.
It's really funny because I think a lot of games of this standard are incredibly skill intensive. Like there's some super intricate, very like complex cards, complex lines, complex decks. So I think there are like very skill intensive games, but then there's also more face roll kind of games than I'm used to. So I think like it really depends on like the matchup and how the game plays. But I feel like there's more non games than there have been in the past, just because of like the speed of some of the decks. I think you're right, though, that your agency in deck building is really huge. And I think that certainly has a big impact. I think Krim hit on some good examples of that. Like, if you're not playing like the cheap removal spells, that's a choice you're making, right? You could be playing more of those and then, in theory, like minimizing the number of non-games that you play and increasing your agency in the games by making the right choices in deck building. Before I move on to number 3, a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's show is brought to you by Shopify. We've been using Shopify for years to run our merch store, MTGGoldfishMerch.com. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business, from the launch your online shop stage to our first real-life store stage, all the way to the did a million order stage. Shopify is there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soaps or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell everywhere, from their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout and sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. What's great about Shopify is it works no matter how big you are. From selling your first tokens to handling your huge ebb and flow playmat campaign, everything was a breeze due to Shopify. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US, and Shopify is a global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way, because businesses that grow on Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial at shopify.com/goldfish. All lowercase letters. Go to shopify.com/goldfish now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/goldfish. All right, moving on to number 3 on our list, and we kind of already hit on this one. We want the games to be skill intensive, and we can't go too deep on this because I think we kind of covered it, but good players should win more than bad ones. You should be rewarded by playing tightly and correctly and learning your deck. And I feel like, I don't know. We already talked about this one. Krim, you got any thoughts on this? Do you feel like Magic has become less skill intensive over the years, or not really?
I think there was eras where like face rolling was just simple. You didn't really have to think about too much of what you're doing. And I think we're now seeing us stray away from those cards. You have to work a little bit more now. Like there's not just like a simple all-in-one engine. There's no Omnath. There's, like things like Oko and the Nissas and all that stuff, right? So we are now seeing where you actually have to play Magic, and that is an interesting point. So I think we did suffer at a good chunk of time. I thought Standard was in a really bad spot, and it kind of bummed me out because it's my favorite format to play. But now I feel like we're starting to like see more skill intensive like decks. Like you can't just auto win on like Golgari. You can't just auto win on discard decks. There's a lot of archetypes out there now that you just have to actually sit and work your way through and think out the decision tree. So I'm liking where Magic is going, but yeah. I would be lying if I told you that Standard was like wasn't like easy at one point, like what Omnath Standard or whatever.
I think it's important to point out too with Standard that we're still like in this weird upheaval with switching to 3-year Standard. Like I was thinking about it, like yes, we had our first rotation with 3-year Standard, but according to Wizards, Murders at Karlov Manor was a first set that they like partially designed with this in mind. So right now we're still like in this weird middle ground, and it's not where it's going to be. So if there are issues with Standard, maybe just wait another year and see what things look like when they actually design for it. Because I think there's criticisms about like black mid-range still at the top of the meta, the same before rotation, nothing changed. But maybe that's going to be something that's different once Wizards actually has like all the design wheels in motion and are able to really focus on 3-year standards. So I think we still got to wait and see a little bit. But moving on to number 4. Interactive. I think good formats are interactive. We've seen this criticism of Modern at various points where it's kind of just 2 ships passing in the night. It's just 2 people goldfishing and seeing who can do their combo first. I think that in general, that makes a format worse, right? We'd rather have your deck interacting with my deck, some back and forth going on. And we've even seen this, I think. I wonder what you think of these examples. Like in Standard, I think we've run into problems in the past where some of the best decks or cards are hard for some colors to interact with. I think like Nexus of Fate Standard or even Emergent Ultimatum Standard, where you have these really powerful haymakers that you can only really interact with on the stack. So that kind of made it so every deck had to like try to splash blue so they could try to interact on the stack to counter these like really powerful pushed effects. So what do you think? Is interactivity, is that important? Like, is just 2 combo decks popping off? Is that a healthy format, a good format? Or do you need to have some interactivity going on?
I mean, if they want to just have it so the game kind of becomes like Lorcana in Pokemon, where I just take my turn and then I pass, and then if you take your turn, then yeah, Hearthstone, that's great. You can do that. But it will only just slightly ruin why everyone loves Magic, right? Because no matter what game I play, no matter where I go, I'm always pining for one thing. How do I interact with my opponent's game plan and not just on my turn? I think Magic is at its best when there is interaction between both sides, like both teams, right? Both players. So I personally like interaction. I think if you can't interact with some of the best pieces in the game, then it just eventually becomes a bad format, and it just becomes a bad like time, right? I hope that we don't return to those times where I have to feel the dead and Nexus of Fate, but like
Can I propose too much interaction? One of the problems with Modern is that almost every color has 1 mana, remove anything, and in specific, any creature. And if you want to chart the downfall of Goyf, right, it is not really the introduction of like 18 creatures that like are bigger than Goyf, such as Murktide and Death Shadow stuff. It's really Fatal Push.
Fatal Push,
right? Like
Fatal Push.
1 mana black, basically remove anything from the game, and it got worse. Right now we have Leyline Binding. Even remove non-creatures. Why not? We have Unholy Heat. Why can red just kill any creature now? If you go back to the old days, you had 2 mana Terminate. And that was like the undisputed 2 mana in 2 colors, remove something, and that's the price you had to pay. That allowed you to play like creatures that cost more than 1, right? Because if you played a 2 mana creature, you got terminated. At least you traded even, right? But now when you play a 2-drop, you get traded with a 1 mana spell, and then you lose tempo, and then you lose. So I would argue that maybe too much interaction is bad, and especially lopsided interaction, right? Because we still don't have stack interaction for basically non-blue, especially at this rate, right? So, as a unfair deck, I can interact with all your creatures for 1 mana, but then as a fair deck, I can't interact with anything you're doing really, except for trying to kill you, right? So there's this imbalance of interaction that's happening, especially in something like Modern. And then like Legacy has seen this imbalance for like a very long time, right? Standard, usually the balance is better because you don't have the fast combo, so the need to react on the stack is not as great. But yeah, there's something to be said about too much interaction and then you can't get anything done. Like, you play anything, it gets removed too efficiently, and then you can't actually make forward progress.
I've even seen like some people arguing this about standard too. I think Brian Kibler maybe has been talking a lot about cut down at various points and how he thinks that's just like too efficient of interaction for standard and how it's pushed things out of the format. This I think was a few months ago, so I don't know, maybe it's changed with the rotation, but I think I have seen people argue that about standard as well. What do you think about this? So I was talking to people on social media about this, and Andrea Mengucci said that one of the big things for him was a good format, the best deck in the format will be a fair deck. Do you think that's a prereq to being a good format? Like, you're the Jund player, Richard. Like, does that make for a good format when you have some fair style deck as the biggest deck in the format?
Is also
I guess
fair,
yeah, a
by the
Crim
way.
deck could also be a fair deck, sort of.
I would just agree that if Control is the best deck in the format, that's a good format. I can tell you if Combo is the best, it's not. So I guess mid-range wins by default. It means like mid-range plays on the fundamental axis of like play threats and removal, right? And if that is good enough to compete, then I think you're playing what people consider to be Magic the Gathering. Whereas if Nadu is the best deck in the format, you're kind of playing this weird solitaire game that's not really what people think of when they think of Magic. So it's probably right? Like when you play mid-range, it feels like a game of limited, kind of, right? And that's just like I attack, I block, I remove, and I'm able to compete with the unfair decks because I'm the best deck in the format, and that makes it good. As opposed to Hogak is the best deck in the format, or Nadu is the best deck in the format. Can't do anything but jam 15 sideboard cards and then hope for the best, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at Con Standard, which is kind of revered by the entire community as like one of the best standard formats, right?
Yep.
You had you had Rhino with the mid-range deck. You had a control deck to try to fight those decks. You had mono red at the same time. So I think a good format having like, a mid-range deck be at the top like Siege Rhino, I think is actually, I agree with that, right? If the most busted thing that a deck could be doing is be a fair deck, then that's a great format to be playing in. And that also means that a lot of other archetypes can thrive as well. So that doesn't mean, like, by the way, that it's only mid-range, because the problem with that is we did have an only mid-range format, and there was no aggro. And the mid-range threats were so good that control couldn't exist anyways, because you couldn't let any threat through. So yeah, like this is I agree that a fair deck should be at the top, but within reason, because I would like other archetypes, and like things to exist.
Right. So you don't want any deck to be the only deck. We don't want a like whatever S+ tier deck that's like, tier 0 in the format. But so I think you want it to be like the most played deck maybe, like, but you want other things to exist for sure. Number 5 on the list, we already talked on this, balanced. You want your formats to be balanced. This includes win rates, threats versus answers. You need a balance there. But let's move on to number 6, because number 6, I'm glad Crim brought up Con Standard, because it's good formats are evolving. Formats should change slowly, probably. A new deck should be able to rise to the top as the format develops by exploiting the weaknesses of the most played deck. Traditionally, evolution in the real world is a slow process. When it happens too quickly, it can be a turnoff. But I think that Con Standard was one of my favorite examples of an evolving format, because there were a lot of really powerful decks, but if you ever go back and just look through decks that won GPs, Pro Tours during that time, you'd have Jeskai be the number 1 deck for a while, and then Mardu would be the number 1 deck for a while, and then Abzan, and then 4-color, and then Mono Red. It was constant, like month to month, something was rising up to be the best deck in the format, and I think that's like the best formats when that happens. That's like the opposite of Pioneer. I think the biggest issue with Pioneer is it doesn't evolve enough, and we end up in these periods where you have 1 or 2 or 3 decks that are just clearly the best decks in the format, and it lasts for like a year and a half before something changes, often with a banning, and it just gets old after a while. So I think you need some level of evolution for a format to be fun. Do you think that Modern, is it just too much in Modern? How do you think Modern applies to this, Richard, with Modern Horizon sets? Does that count as evolution, or is that something else altogether? Is that more rotation?
That's forced evolution.
I could play Twin versus Jund versus Infect versus Tron for the rest of time, right? I don't feel you need to like,
I don't know about that.
rotate that, right? Because like you get new cards. Like your archetype
Yeah.
doesn't need to become tier 2, right? You get a new Tron finisher or something. You get a new Jund piece. But it's expectation, right? So standard you expect to change frequently, right? And you play for 2 years and then it rotates, right? You clean up the mistakes of last standard, you move on to the next standard and you go, right? Traditionally, eternal formats or non-rotating formats like legacy, vintage, modern, I think the expectation was you just play your old stuff, and that would mean that it doesn't move so fast. Wizards has kind of upended this in recent times with the introduction of Modern Horizons, where it changes a little too fast, right? It's fresh, Brewer's Paradise. As content creators, we love it, right? But if you were like, I'm going to spend $1,000 to buy a deck that I can play for 5 years, but it's gone in 3 months because it moved too fast, right? Like then that's not good. So it depends on where you're going. Like everyone likes fresh, except when your expectation is different. And I liked it better when standard was the fresh format and everything was not. But everything is fresh now. We got to sell all the cards.
Seth, I feel like the one we just talked about, number 6 here, this one specifically feels like it's very essential to you. Having talked with you over the podcast, over time, all of that, this feels like probably one of the most important parts for what makes a format for you. Am I correct in?
Yeah, I think this and diversity are probably two of the biggest ones for me, like that I just always come back to, that those are like, I want the formats to be changing. I will say, I agree with Richard that like the upheaval in modern has been too much, even though I enjoy when we get a Modern Horizons and everything's fresh and new, it's really good for content. But overall, I think modern has taken this like too far to the extreme. But yes, I'm a big believer that formats need to be like evolving and changing to keep them fresh and fun. So yeah, I'm definitely big on this one.
I think this is where you and I differed a little bit in standard, because I think every new set we were talking about, and I think your expectation was that a new archetype will come out and push out some old stuff. But I myself don't mind if Mono Black added one new card.
Yeah,
right?
No, I that's not enough for me. That doesn't even feel like a new deck to me. I definitely I want to see more than that. And that's been one of my if I have a criticism of current standard, it's been that the black mid-range decks have just kind of kept trucking along at the top of the format. The format's been super fun, so it's not like a huge criticism or anything. But I was hoping for even more change than we got at this rotation. Honestly, I was hoping for a bigger shakeup. When I think from your perspective, it was probably a pretty good amount of shakeup. Really, there's a lot of new things going on. The best deck's a different deck, so
I feel like I'm free falling. I have no idea what's going on. It's like, oh my god, they got one new card. What's happening right now?
This is the Brewers versus players argument, right? Like Brewers want to build new decks, right? And you want to brew with 75 slots open, whereas the player focused the gameplay focused player just wants to play the game, right? And they don't mind that their deck didn't change or there's only one new card. I know Krim has said this, his favorite is Cobblade Mirror or Fairy's Mirror, right? Where you're just deck list is solidified, let's throw it down, who knows what they're doing, and you play the game, right? And a lot of pros have this take because that's the most skill testing thing, right? Gameplay skill testing, right? It takes out the brewing aspect, it takes out the metagaming aspect. You both have the same 75. You're gonna sit down, whoever has the better fundamentals and hopefully not too much luck will win, right? It's whoever knows more will win, and that's the way to test the gameplay. So I think it does matter where you come from. Are you a brewer or are you a gameplay person? And all of us are a bit of both, right? But where do you skew on that scale?
And that's probably
in that exact moment, also, when you know each other's 75, I think the thing that's interesting is how I used to play the janky stuff, right? Because you would expect I have so I'm playing around, you playing around it by not playing it and playing something else entirely. So when it is so in a weird way, it is slightly brewing, but having known 75s amongst each other, and the player in me then knows, okay, now I can subvert expectations and do other things. So I kind of like it when it's like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that is probably the kind of the divide there between how Krim and I view things. Although we are kind of all a mix in the end. All right, moving on. Number 7, formats that are good have an identity, I think. So like standard, recent cards, it's fast changing. Pioneer, no supplemental sets, no universes beyond. Modern, I don't know what Modern's identity is. What would Modern's identity be? Legacy, obviously, you play your old expensive cards. Vintage, you can play all the cards. Does Modern have an identity? Is it
Birds.
maybe Modern
It's
Horizons
one bird.
is the
One
identity, like the opposite of Pioneer?
It's one bird.
Nadu is the identity.
Yeah, Nadu essentially transcends everything.
I feel like Modern used to be the place where you could build a deck and play it for years and years. That was what I consider the identity of Modern. Like, you invest in this expensive deck and can play it for a long time. That's not really the case anymore. So now I don't know what it is. Do you have any ideas, Richard?
It was supposed
Modern
to be
is Yu-Gi-Oh.
Legacy, but
Modern
more
is
affordable.
Yu-Gi-Oh.
But
Cheaper
No, it's
Legacy.
yeah, like
Yu-Gi-Oh.
so Legacy.
Okay.
So I mean, if you go to the old form, like Legacy is supposed to be like all the cards you can play, but not really, because there's some banned cards. So that's vintage, right? You can play everything. It's restricted, right? And then all of these are unaffordable. So we have Modern, right? It's supposed to be like that, but affordable. But it's supposed to be a place you can play your old cards. Like once your standard deck rotates, what do you do with it, right? You throw it into Modern. But Wizards has introduced Pioneer because Modern has become unaffordable, right? Like the cards are too old. You can't get access to the whole card pool. It's too big. But then they just started selling Modern Horizons to like juice up Modern. And then now it's not a place to play old cards. So it's lost its identity. I don't know that Wizards has given it one other than the thing to sell Modern Horizons for, right? Like the thing to put universes beyond. Like that does not go into standard. Like, I don't know what they're doing with it, really, right?
That's I think
one of the
that's
funniest things is for all you listeners who don't know, I actually used to love Modern a lot. I would see Richard at the locals all the time. We'd play Modern together, things like that. That's how I met Richard and all that. But
you're playing standard, Krim, in Modern.
Sorry. I was playing standard in Modern. Okay. But legitimately, I think that world that we are asking for is pre-Modern Horizons. I don't think there's ever going to be a return to that now.
No.
Modern is a format where now it's funny to me. It's the fastest I see. It's all about people trying to quickly assemble a way to not play the game. And it's like I play a burst of Magic. You see a burst of Magic in the first 2 turns, and then you will never play again, either you or me. Between Nadu, between all these other things that just essentially take up all the turn time. I don't know. I think this format has its biggest problem in that it just introduced nonstop resource cheating. I know I joke about it, and like Yu-Gi-Oh players even probably now. You know what? I think Modern might have gone farther than Yu-Gi-Oh. Yu-Gi-Oh at least still uses some amount of resources now. I don't worry, Yu-Gi-Oh players. I know about Xyz and all of that stuff. But the main thing is like Modern now is just like cool. Leyline Binding is 1 mana. Answer everything. All the elementals. Nothing. You don't need more than 2 mana in this format, right? Like, and that's kind of wild to me, and it's kind of misleading because you look at like Leyline Bind, that's a 6 cost, doesn't matter. Murktide Regent, that's a 2 cost, even though it says 8. So I think the problem is that Modern just kind of cheated on resources way too much.
That might be true. I mean, there are still some decks that actually cast Yawgmoth or Thought-Knot Seer. So there are like some decks that do that, but I think you're
Those
right
are the
that is
fair
like,
decks, by the way.
Those are the fair decks of the format. I think that is true, but like, where do you go, right? Like once you power creep Tarmogoyf with Fatal Push, you have to keep scaling up power, so you print better 1-drops, but you can't really make your removal cost less than 1, so then you end up putting free spells, and like, it's such a weird cycle of how all of that works. I will also say in Modern, I think its future identity might just be Universes Beyond. We'll check back in like a year or two, but I feel like that's where all the Universes Beyond sets are going to be legal. Some of them I expect, like when we get Final Fantasy or Marvel, there's going to be some good cards in there, like Lord of the Rings. I think in the future, maybe that's going to be what Modern is about. I don't know how current players are going to like that. It might not be something that everyone really likes, but I would not be surprised if that develops into Modern's identity. It's like the constructed format where you can play Universes Beyond, basically.
Just wait, Doctor Strange is going to teleport your opponent's deck into the trash can. And you're going to auto win. It's going to be great.
I'm going to call you out on that, Seth, because it's going to be standard. Wizards going to
think it's going to be standard?
Straight into standard. Like why? Like why put it into the scuffed Modern format? So okay, here's why. Because you can charge more. You're like, oh, it's a Modern card. We charge double the price for the booster, right? So that may be one reason why they keep it in Modern. But if Universes Beyond is the primary selling factor at Wizards and they're making money hand over fist, why would they not shove it into standard? Like what is special about standard, right? Nothing, right? In fact, it's way better because you have Arena and now you can shove Doctor Strange into Arena, right? So it will go into standard, like guaranteed, almost guaranteed, Seth. I can almost guarantee it.
We will. I think there's a reasonable chance that happens. I think we'll know more by the end of next year. Because we know we're getting Final Fantasy and Marvel. Like, if they don't make a change with like those and how big and hype they are, then I'll start to think, okay, maybe they're not going to put it into standard. But I think that next year is the year where we'll really get to see what Wizards' direction is with those sets. But it does make sense to put them into standard.
How does that look then? Because then Lord of the Rings was designed for Modern, right? So you get powerful cards. So then does that then mean?
That would be a concern, right? That maybe you can't print, like, because the other thing is Commander is the most popular format. Wizards wants to print powerful cards that can show up in Commander. If they all have to go through Standard, maybe you can't push cards enough to make them show up in Commander. So I don't know, maybe there's some reasons not to do it too. It'll be interesting.
Increase the power level of Standard to Modern, Seth.
I mean, like a terrible time.
We're getting Land of War Elves back. Land of War's coming in November. We know that.
We know that, right?
All right, my last three, and then we'll get to a Fishmail. We can go through these quick. A good format, in my opinion. So he has an identity. Number 8, it's well managed. Shout out to Gavin. I think if you want an example of what I consider to be a really well-managed format, it's Pauper. It's how Gavin runs it, how there's a council of players that can give feedback and influence it, how well the decisions are communicated around banning and format changes. So I think Pauper is like the shining example of how a format can be managed really well. On the other hand, I would say maybe Pioneer is what I would consider an example of a format that's not managed very well, where things are broken, the communication's kind of muddled and lacking, it doesn't change very quickly. But shout out to Gavin for how he manages Pauper. Number 9, accessible. And this is not just prices, it's partly prices. Like, can I afford to play Modern? Can budget decks be at least somewhat competitive in a format? But it's also like, can a new player pick up the format? Like, is the format accessible for a new player to get into? I think good formats have some level of accessibility, and not every format has to be the same. I'm not expecting standard. Like, what makes an accessible standard is going to be different than what makes an accessible Modern or Legacy. Like, it's not like your Legacy decks have to cost standard prices, or it has to be as easy to pick up Legacy as it is standard. But I think formats do need some level of accessibility. And then the last one, is it fun to play? Like, that's probably the biggest one, honestly. When it comes down to it, why are we playing Magic? Because it's fun. And, like, if a format's fun, then it's going to be good. If it's not fun, it's not good. And obviously fun is subjective. But I think when you have a whole bunch of players who, like, stop playing a format, like we saw in maybe, like, Affinity, way back in original Mirrodin, where people are just like, I'm not going to play the format anymore because it's so miserable. That's a pretty good sign when a whole bunch of people are saying it's not fun, that's actually a problem with the format.
And maybe that's why I'm able to handle so much nonsense. That was
that your favorite
format.
Standard, Krim? Did you
oh God, no!
That
was such a miserable format.
All right. Any final thoughts on what makes a good format to wrap all this up?
I think we touched up on it pretty much.
All right, let me ask you this then. What's, based on our criteria that we went through, what would you say is the best format right now, based on, or the most good format?
The most gooder format.
The most gooder.
I think I'm gonna go with standard. Surprise to everybody. It sounds like of course Krim would say that, and I see why you would think that, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I think a lot of people are afraid to admit that standard is pretty good right now. This format is there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of just everything across the board. I think you get all the depth of gameplay that you could ask for, but you also, like Seth had mentioned, there are accessible decks for like cheaper. There's a lot of everything across the board right now. So if you're looking for a fun 1v1 outlet and you don't want to worry about rule zeroing and like dealing with a table or anything like that, play standard. It's really fun. I genuinely cannot tell you enough how good this format is. So just try it. Obviously, it's different. Don't go in expecting like politicking in Commander, because I know that Commander is the most popular format right now, but I know there are Commander players who need a 1v1 outlet, and I think Standard's where you're going to get that.
What do you think, Richard?
Can I say Commander? Is that allowed?
Sure. Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
I think of 60 card formats, it is Standard, but I think the problem is Wizards has a problem with all of their formats, really. Like Standard and Limited, maybe the ones that are getting away with it, but basically all the non-rotating ones people are complaining about. Vintage, Legacy, Modern, Pioneer. And the reason is you get sweaty, you get invested in it, it looks bad, you get upset, you get mad at Wizards, you make angry posts. Commander, there's nothing to get sweaty about. It's like all casual, no one's keeping track of anything, so you're like, it's fine. And you're not like as invested, right? You're like, well, that Nadu deck was stupid in Commander as well, but whatever. You just scoop and play the next one. You didn't waste like 16 hours at a Grand Prix or something before you determined this, right? So the stakes are lower, people aren't complaining as much. But I think the eternal
Richard has been hardened by the GP life.
I've been hardened by the GP life. The non-rotating formats are not good right now, I would say. Standard has been good for quite a while now. People say Limited is good, but I've seen some of the rumblings in Limited. It looks a little weird to me. I actually want to play Limited, but Limited historically has been very good, and it hits most of the fundamentals of the things we talked about today. But yeah, and all of these like kind of just dodge the fire design, I guess, right? Like I think like that's what's causing the issues with the older formats. And then Commander's just so casual, no one really cares.
I mean, I gotta back up Krim, I think, and say that right now, Standard is the most gooder format. Although we can revisit. We can revisit after the bannings end of the month. I think that with some changes, I still love Modern. I think Pioneer could be a really thriving format, even Legacy and Vintage. So I have not given up on those formats anywhere near as much as some people have. So I'm really looking forward to the bannings, and maybe it'll look a lot differently a month or two from now. It doesn't change the systemic issues that tend to lead us back into the same places in some of those formats. Just banning Nadu isn't going to fix, every issue. But I'm still holding out hope. But right now, I think Standard is very clearly, based on this criteria, doing the best out of all of the 60 card Magic formats. And Richard is also right. The Commander does really well there too. But anyway, that is what makes a good Magic format. Very curious what other people think. If you're listening, let us know. What do you think? What do we miss? What makes a good format for you? Which format do you think is doing best right now? Oh man, we're going to do a Fishmail this week. Should we still do a quick Fishmail?
All right.
Sure. All right. Quick Fishmail. We're running a little long, but we'll do a quick one.
If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail. Solid gold toilet. What do you think the biggest negative about the release schedule and the amount of product we're getting recently is? Do you see it getting worse before it gets better? So we've talked about this issue of release schedule for like years, right? And like here we are. I don't even know what happened with Assassin's Creed and like Outlaws. Like Bloomburrow's here, but wait, Duskmourn is coming up. Right, like Duskmourn is like just around the corner,
almost here.
What's going on with release schedule now that we've kind of been in this cadence for a while? Do we still dislike it? Do we like it?
The worst part of it for me, I'll do my little mini rant. The worst part of it is them doing the early spoilers like right when the set release. That's the part that drives me the most crazy, is you have like literal pre-release weekend or set release day, and then we get the early spoilers for the next set. Maybe that's just a content creator thing, although I've heard some other people that aren't content creators say it. But I think like just space that out a little bit more. I don't mind getting a set every couple of months. I think that's perfectly fine. I actually kind of like having something new. Maybe that's also a content creator thing, but I like having something new to play with. But I do wish there was more breathing room to explore each set, because I feel like even as someone who does this all day, every day, I feel like I don't get to explore all of Outlaws of Thunder Junction or Assassin's Creed before I'm on to the next set. And I imagine it's way worse for someone who is not doing Magic as a full-time living.
I think this will be the longest break we've had, right, between Bloomburrow and Duskborn without any new sets or anything like that.
Yeah. And it's about a month.
It's about a month.
Until we
so
start spoiler season.
Mystery
Not when
boosters
we-
too,
yes,
but yes.
Oh, I
Oh,
guess
yeah.
sure. But that's not like that doesn't.
I
really
forgot
count,
about
I guess. But yeah, I
Secret
I think this is just. I think they need to slow down, right? Because we do it all the time, and I just haven't known what some cards existed. So, oh, that's cool. When did that come out? What do you mean that was in the big score? So yeah, there's a lot that is coming out right now. So hopefully they'll slow it down just a hair. But as creators, I think we also just love new stuff. So it's nice,
That's true.
but also slow it down just a little.
I'm still building Doctor
Yeah,
Who. I don't
just a
know about
little
you
off the
guys.
top, Watsy. Just a little off
Just
the
a little.
top. Anyway, wow, Richard's like a whole year in the past. That was like last fall.
Do you know how many
Anyway,
legendaries there are there?
How do people send in Fishmail for next week, Richard?
All right, hit us up at MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
Anyway, that brings us to the end of episode 497 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. Richard, Crib, thanks for hanging out. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we will be back next week to talk about whatever goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, have an amazing week, everyone. And this is the crew signing out.